evening. You are watching the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. First, the headlines. His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq issues royal directives to establish Al-Sumud radio for the armed forces. His Majesty Sultan Haytham receives a cable of greetings from His Highness the Deputy Prime Minister for Defense Affairs on the occasion of the Armed Forces Day. The Sultanate celebrates Armed Forces Day in recognition of their great contribution to building the nation and preserving its achievements. And Oman welcomes what His Majesty King of Morocco announced in his phone calls to the presidents of the US and Palestine. Those were the headlines. Now for the news in detail. Coinciding with the Armed Forces Day, which falls on the 11th of December each year, His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq, Supreme Commander, issued his royal directives to establish a Sumud radio for the Sultan's armed forces in recognition from His Majesty to the national sacred duty shouldered by the Sultan's armed forces and his royal care to the affiliates of the armed forces. A Sumud radio will be launched on the 11th of January 2021, which coincides with His Majesty assuming power. The new radio will highlight the Sultan's armed forces' sacred role and missions in protecting the homeland and its achievements and preserves its deep-rooted cultural heritage. Officials in the Ministry of Defense has made preparations for this radio station in line with Oman Vision 2040 and to keep abreast with the latest trends in communication, media, and information technology. His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq Al Said has received a cable of greetings from His Highness Sayyid Shihab bin Tariq Al Said, Deputy Prime Minister for Defense Affairs on the occasion of the Armed Forces Day. In the cable, he said that the Sultan's armed forces, all military affiliates of the Ministry of Defense, is celebrating this occasion on the 11th of December. He added that he is honored along with the victorious armed forces and all the affiliates of the Ministry of Defense to forward greetings and best wishes on this dear occasion in recognition of the achievements and the comprehensive development witnessed in our country Oman, praying to Almighty to keep Your Majesty as the leader to this beloved country. He further said that the armed forces reaffirms its contribution to building this dear nation. The armed forces has established its prominent status and its sacred duty to protect every inch of the Omani territories, its achievements and capabilities until Oman has become a safe country blessed with tranquility and peace under the wise leadership of His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq, the Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. Further, he added that the armed forces renews its loyalty and faith to continue their sacred duty under His Majesty's wise guidance. His Highness Sayyid Shihab bin Tariq Al Said, Deputy Prime Minister for Defense Affairs, concluded by praying to the Almighty to endow His Majesty with a long life and good health. The Sultanate celebrates today the Armed Forces Day, which falls on the 11th of December every year. The Sultan's armed forces have accomplished many achievements in various organizational, training, and armament aspects, thanks to the attention and care of His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. The armed forces are taking wide strides towards construction and development in line with the requirements of each stage, performing their sacred national duty of protecting the soil of the homeland and preserving its gains and achievements effectively. The celebration of this glorious day comes in recognition of the efforts and sacrifice made by the armed forces affiliates since the dawn of the Omani Renaissance, which was built by His Majesty the late Sultan Qaboos, may his soul rest in peace. The wise leadership of the Sultanate and since the start of the modern Renaissance has paid great attention to the armed forces, providing it with the latest weaponry and equipment which enable it to perform its noble tasks. His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq has sent a cable of greetings to His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, President of Kenya, on his country's independence anniversary. The Sultanate of Oman welcomes what His Majesty King Mohammed VI of the Kingdom of Morocco announced through his phone calls to both the U.S. President Donald Trump and President Mohammed Abbas of Palestine, and hopes that it will support the efforts to establish a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in the Middle East. Still to come on News Bulletin. An Omani traveler starts his journey on the back of his camel from the wilaya of Edom to Muscat. Welcome back to the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. Faced with the prospect of sanctions from both the United States and the European Union, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said that economic penalties would be detrimental to all sides and all of Turkey's disputes with its allies can be resolved through dialogue and cooperation. Erdogan's comments today came hours after EU gave the green light for the expansion of sanctions against Turkey over its exploration of gas reserves in the Mediterranean waters claimed by the EU members Greece and Cyprus. Turkey also faces US sanctions over its purchase of the Russian air defense system, which has already resulted in the NATO member country being kicked out of the US F-35 stealth fighter program. European Union leaders reached a hard-fought deal today to cut the bloc's greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by the end of the decade compared with the 1990 levels, avoiding a hugely embarrassing deadlock ahead of the UN climate meeting this weekend. Following night-long discussions at their two-day summit in Brussels, the 27 member states approved the EU Executive Commission's proposal to toughen the bloc's intermediate target on the way to climate neutrality by mid-century, after a group of reluctant coal-reliant countries finally agreed to support the improved goal. 5 years after the Paris Agreement, the EU wants to be a leader in the fight against global warming. Yet the bloc's heads of the state and governments were unable to agree on the new target the last time they met in October, mainly because of the financial concerns by the Eastern nations seeking more clarity about how to fund and handle the green transition. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said today that Britain is likely to leave the European Union without a trade deal in just under 3 weeks' time. Britain quit the EU in January but remains an informal member until December 31st, the end of the transition period during which it has remained in the EU single market and customs union. Both sides say they want to agree an arrangement to cover nearly $1 trillion in annual trade, but talks are at now in place. European Commission Chief von der Leyen told EU leaders that a no deal was more likely than a deal. Johnson and von der Leyen have given negotiators until Sunday evening to break the impasse at talks that are deadlocked over fishing rights and EU demands for Britain to face consequences in the future it diverges from the bloc's rules. In the case of a no deal on trade, Britain would lose zero tariff and zero quota access to the European single market of 450 million consumers overnight. U.S. experts voted to recommend granting emergency approval for Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, paving the way for America to become the next country to move ahead with mass immunization. It comes as the worst-hit country in the world logged nearly 6,000 virus deaths in just 48 hours, and the overall toll was approaching 300,000. With Northern Hemisphere countries hit by a pandemic, winter surge, Britain this week became the first Western country to roll out the Pfizer vaccine. Canada, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia have also approved it. Another vaccine development effort suffered a setback as France's Sanofi and Britain's GSK say that their jab will not be ready until the end of 2021, after interim results show a low immune response in older adults. The novel coronavirus has killed more than 1.58 million people since the outbreak emerged in China last December. At least 69.56 million cases of coronavirus have been registered. Out of these, 44.26 million are now considered recovered. Yesterday, 12,317 new deaths and 665,171 new cases were recorded worldwide. The United States is the worst affected country with 292,190 deaths from 15.62 million cases. At least 5.6 million people have been declared recovered. After the U.S., the hardest hit countries are Brazil with 179,765 deaths, India 142,186, Mexico 112,326, and the United Kingdom with 63,082 deaths. Europe overall has 465,555 deaths, and Asia has reported 203,426. The Middle East 83,639, and Africa 55,244 deaths. South Korea is expanding the use of rapid tests and deploying hundreds of police officers and soldiers to help with the contact tracing as it deals with the worst surge of coronavirus cases since the early days of the pandemic. The rapid antigen test at emergency rooms, intensive care units, and remote area hospitals will be covered by the National Health Insurance starting Monday, which would cost recipients about $7 for each test. Antigen test and another form of rapid testing based on saliva samples will also be available at coronavirus testing sites in the Seoul metropolitan area, where officials are temporarily providing free tests to anyone regardless of whether they have symptoms or clear reasons to suspect infection. The country will also deploy more than 800 police officers, soldiers, and civil servants to support contact tracing efforts in the capital area, which has been at the center of the viral resurgence in the recent weeks. Oman oil price February delivery 2021 reached $50 and 57 cents per barrel, recording an increase by $1.41. The average price of Oman oil December 2020 delivery reached $41.11 per barrel, thus 49 cents lower than the price of November 2020 delivery. The Omani traveler Ahmed bin Harib al-Mahrouqi set off on a 7-day journey of covenant and loyalty on the back of his camel from the Wilaya of Adam in the Governorate of Dakhiliya, heading to the Governorate of Muscat. More details in the following report.
Under the theme Covenant and Loyalty, the Omani traveler Ahmed bin Harib al-Mahrouqi started his journey this year from the Wilaya of Adam in Dakhiliya Governorate, heading to Muscat Governorate.
In this journey, we have got a lot of message to send. First things, we send our heritage of Omanian. Second things, we need to send to show them how our building was, olden village, how they are living in in that days. And this is a message of, again, for the tourism to know Adam, it have got a lot of places to come and visit it. In this journey, I have got two with me, they have enjoyed. We have got Mohammed bin Salim Gahwani. He's a good traveler, and he has traveled from Muscat to Saudi Arabia. And I have got my sister here, she will be with us from Denmark, and we will be continuous every day, 20 to 25 kilometers per day.
On his way to Muscat Governorate, the traveler Ahmed and his companions will pass through several wilayas of Dakhiliya Governorate, shedding light on the historical, archaeological, and touristic monuments of these wilayas. The traveler Ahmed will embark on a 7-day ride, crossing Dakhiliya Governorate all the way to Muscat, carrying with him messages of loyalty and reviving the ancient Omani heritage.
It was an amazing opportunity to, first of all, see, as Ahmed said, several of the villages on the way as we are walking, and he is a perfect teacher to teach me about every place we go, things that I didn't know about before. Even after 16 years, he can teach me something new everywhere.
Through his journey, the traveler Ahmed al-Mahrouqi also seeks to encourage the youth to preserve the Omani heritage and traditions, especially camel riding. صالح بن خلفان الرحبي, Wilaya of Adam, Dakhiliya Governorate.
This is the Sultanate of Oman television. Before we end tonight's news bulletin, here are the main points once again. His Majesty Sultan Haytham bin Tariq issues royal directives to establish a Sumud radio for the armed forces. His Majesty the Sultan receives a cable of greetings from His Highness the Deputy Prime Minister for Defense Affairs on the occasion of the Armed Forces Day. The Sultanate celebrates Armed Forces Day in recognition of their great contribution to building the nation and preserving its achievements. And Oman welcomes what His Majesty King of Morocco announced in his phone calls to the presidents of the US and Palestine. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news bulletin. From all of us here at the newsroom and the studios, thank you for watching and have a good night.